It is said that the biggest difficulty in understanding Christianity is the institution of Sunday school. The biggest difficulty in understanding Plato and Platonic thought is college and university philosophy courses. Because in both cases, there's a certain significant spiritual dimension that is ignored. And I would like to take up tonight the spiritual dimension of Plato in terms of one of the short dialogues. It's only 25 pages long, called The Apology, and it happens to be one of my favorite dialogues. It's one of my favorite ones because it makes a spiritual dimension of philosophy its central issue. Now, let me first tell you about the structure of the dialogue. I always go into structure. If you would like.
Yes, I'm just curious, when did this spiritual dimension stop being taught?
I don't know whether it stopped because it only entered Europe with the Latin translations of Plato in the late 15th, 16th century. Philosophy has only been taught through the universities.
So it has always been a secular then?
Yeah, no. Because Europe, we get our philosophy from Europe. Europe has redefined philosophy to serve its own needs. So let me see whether I can express this in the dialogue itself rather than just talking general. As an example, this is the great dialogue, the apology. This is the Socrates' trial. This is his defense. It is often explored as a trial, thinking that that's its significance. Let me point out a few things just in terms of structure. The entire dialogue is approximately, depending upon how you cut the pages, but approximately 25 pages. Socrates sets out his goal in the first 2 pages. The goal is quite simple, he says. The goal is to remove the prejudices. He wants to face the prejudices against him. He therefore addresses the court with only one challenge, and the challenge is, please consider one thing and attend carefully to that, whether my plea is just or not. Well, then what is his plea, and what's the nature of the prejudice? Therefore, he first sets out these 2 points in the first 2 pages. Then he introduces what he calls his first accusers, false accusers, accusing him of things which in their very nature is a prejudice. The whole work is a study of the nature of prejudice. A prejudice is a false accusation. Therefore, he takes his first accusers, which he calls those that have been around the longest, and he explores their accusations against him. Then when that's over, which only takes 5 pages, he then addresses the formal charges that are presented against him. That's the affidavit, the written affidavit. He only spends 4 pages on that, and he says at the end of the 4 pages, that's enough. Therefore, what's the rest of the dialogue doing? In this section, which is 7 full pages, is an exploration of what he thinks is the nature of this prejudice and why it's against him. Then in Athenian justice, the system of justice, the courts, you vote twice. You vote twice. First, you vote whether or not you think the person is guilty of the charges. That's the first vote. Then, if the person is guilty, judged guilty, then the charge, you see, is clear, and so is the penalty. The penalty is right there in the charges, in the bottom line. Penalty, In this case, death. So there is no doubt about the penalty. Why the second vote? It gives the opportunity, it gives an opportunity to the person who's been judged guilty, the opportunity to create their own penalty. And therefore, the guilty party has to submit what they consider to be a just penalty. It goes back to the jury. The jury then has to decide between the two of them which one shall be invoked. So therefore, Socrates offers his own penalty. Then the jury has to then decide of the two, and of course they choose the one, death. That's the structure. Clearly, he is not interested at all beyond just dealing with it formally, the charges, for a very interesting reason. The charges literally are true. If you use the work itself, as a basis for judging whether or not there is evidence that can be used to support the charges, the answer is yes. If we set out the charges of the second accusers, second set of accusers, are the formal charges that are offered against him, and if we open up this book and look at it, this dialogue, and look for evidence to see whether we can see evidence that would confirm those charges, the evidence is quite clear, yes. Therefore, there's no question about his guilt, he's guilty. Now, we can vote, we'll vote tonight. You see, you can vote that he's guilty of the charges, and then you can agree that he should get the penalty he offers. And he has a marvelous penalty, which probably so disturbed the jury that they voted for his death rather than even conceive of the possibility of giving it to him in any serious way. So then, let me tell you, what is this prejudice? Because that's what we have to see whether his plea is just or not. What's the prejudice? He breaks it up in two. He says, look, the first charge, it's an old charge. That is that I'm a criminal and a busybody, prying into things under the earth and up in the heavens and making the weaker argument appear the stronger and teaching these things to others, these same things to others. He said, look here, you see, we don't see much in this, but in fact, this is being a witch. Right? This is really big. Prying into the things under the earth, chthonic, right? The underworld and up in the heavens. This is a prejudice against a certain class of people. And he's very clear about that, because after he finishes dismissing the first set of charges, which is really a pretended affidavit, he says these are nothing other than the stock charges against all philosophers. What's the prejudice then? The prejudice is against philosophy. Therefore, what is his defense? The whole apology? A defense of philosophy. Therefore, we have to see what he means by philosophy, because it's quite clear that people then have a view of philosophers, and the view they have of philosophers is that they are these kinds of people who do this kind of thing.